So it gives me a lot of pleasure now to introduce our poet tonight. Kim Stafford is the founding director of the Northwest Writing Institute at Lewis and Clark College. He's the author of more than a dozen books of poetry and prose, including The Muses Among Us, Eloquent Listening and Other Pleasures of the Writer's Craft, and Having Everything Right, Essays of Place. His most recent books are 100 Tricks Every Boy Can Do, or How My Brother Disappeared, and Wind on the Waves, Stories from the Oregon Coast. Kim has books here, so they are going to be for sale after the reading, and he will be here to talk and to sign them. So would you join me in welcoming our poet for the evening, Kim Stafford.
Thank you, Tom, and you rain warriors who've come forth. On the radio they said another band of rain is sweeping across northwest Oregon. The winds are up to 90 on the coast, and I just thought, I felt a wave of patriotism, for Oregon rush through me. And so in that spirit, I thought I would start with an old Oregon poem. We don't know who put these words together, but it was probably on a rainy night, maybe around this time of year, in the middle of the 19th century, first half of the 19th century. And I learned it from an old gentleman named Orlo Flock out in Powell Butte. Really great guy out in Central Oregon. He said, well, this song is from the wet part of Oregon where I was raised. And I want to start with this because to me it's an icon of we put words together in order to celebrate what is difficult. If we can celebrate what is difficult, we're going to be okay. I've reached the land of rain and mud, where flowers and trees so early bud. I've reached the land, oh blessed day, for in Oregon it rains always. Oh, Oregon, wet Oregon, as through thy rain and mud I run. I look above, behind, around, I watch the rain soak in the ground. Watch it rain and watch it pour, and wish it wouldn't rain anymore. A sweet perfume is on the breeze. It comes from fir and alder trees, and all the flowers that bloom and blow, and all the leaves that bud and grow. Oh, Oregon girls, wet Oregon girls, with flashing eyes and soggy curls. They'll sing and dance both night and day till some web-footer comes their way. Meet you at the kitchen door saying, wipe your feet or come no more. So poetry, practical poetry. It's as important as a church key to, let the good times roll. And so, sometimes when we give a poetry reading, we think, well, this is for the elite. Oh, no, it's for the people. In fact, I just taught a workshop this weekend, and at the end of the workshop, after all my years of teaching, I had an epiphany. I realized what a writing workshop really is. It's a listening workshop. We are listening to the secret voice that we've suppressed, the stories, the secrets, the questions, the celebrations. We're listening to each other. And that's unusual. And we're listening to the beauty of the language, the power of the language, the life of the language. So in a writing workshop, we come together and we, use an implement of the pen, and we're going to write some poems, some prose, some stories, some songs, some speeches, some manifestos, some rants, some blessings, whatever we're going to write. But really what we're doing is, this is hands-on listening. And so it's a great honor to be among listeners. a rare thing in our country. You know, the torture report comes out and immediately people are arguing about it. Well, I remember one of my father's sayings, someone said, I really told him off. And my father's thought was, I really listened better than he did. Listen. So, in that spirit, this is my last event of the William Stafford Centennial. So I'm not going to read one of his poems, but I'm going to tell a story about some of us were there in, I think it was March of 2013, planning the William Stafford Centennial. And, you know, I have to say I was a little leery about the whole idea at first. You know, hey, the old man's been gone 20 years. Let's give it a rest, you know. But then I realized, well, no, it's about listening. It's not about poetry. It's about families, sense of place, identity, the life of the seeker. You know, that's what William Stafford was about. And so we had this meeting. Paul Ann was there. A lot of people were there at the downtown library, you know, where things happen. If you want to plan some big thing, you go to the library, get together with worthy friends. And we had all the mucky mucks were there. We had the Oregon Arts Commission. We had the Oregon Historical Society, Oregon Public Broadcasting, Oregon Poetry Association, Friends of William Stafford, you know, State Library, Oregon Library Association, all these, you know, movers and shakers. And we had some cookies. We had flip charts. We had agendas. Well, you know, we were really going to have a big meeting. So we got through our first shift with the flip charts and, you know, all these ideas, all these things we could do. And then we took a break. And at this point, a homeless gentleman came into the room. Remember this? He saw the cookies. And so the president of the Friends of William Stafford went to protect the cookies. And he asked this gentleman, can I help you? And this homeless gentleman said, well, yeah, you know, I basically live here at the library. I'm here every morning and I leave every night. And I like to know what's going on in my building. You know, what are you guys doing? What's going on? Well, Dennis said, we're planning a celebration of a poet. Oh, was he a good one? Well, we think so, William Stafford. Oh, ask me. Ask you what? No, the poem. Sometime when the river is ice, ask me mistakes I have made. Ask me if what I have done is my life. Others have come in their slow way into my thought, and some have tried to help or to hurt. Ask me what difference their strongest love or hate has made. Yeah, that guy. You have a good idea. Have a cookie. So you see, poetry opens doors if you have a poem. So I have brought a few copies of Ask Me. When I told the editor at Grey Wolf Press this story, he said, okay, that's the title poem. Yeah. It's got to be the title poem. And so, you know, it was my job to pick 100 poems out of the 22,000. And from the outset, I knew I'm going to get in trouble. You know, people are going to say, you left out my favorite poem. So I had this idea, I'll put them in clusters. You know, sort of my father's prevailing concerns. I'll have a cluster on school, cluster on nature, sense of place, cluster on war and peace, cluster on the life of the seeker. And so I called Grey Wolf Press, and they said, oh, no, we don't want clusters. Maybe just chronological order. I thought, I am not putting them in chronological order. This is a book for a reader. So I secretly put them in clusters. And the thing is, if you will put your email on the clipboard in the back, oh, actually it's up here, but there's a sheet back there. Give me your email. I'll send you the secret code so that the table of contents you'll be able to see. Because I thought, you know, this is a book for a teacher to say, let's talk about where we live. Let's talk about our chance to get along. Let's talk about learning. Let's talk about school. Let's talk about family. And so there are these clusters to help us do that. Okay, I want to sing another song. Before one of my favorite ways to begin a talk, I forgot to do it this time, but I'll back up and do it now. Before my talk, I would just like to say a few words. You know, I heard one of the elders of the Puyallup tribe started a speech like this, and I thought, that's genius. So before I give my reading, another Oregon folk song. And this one, I think we should sing along to this one. This is the Alsea Girls. Do people know the Alsea Girls? Let's see, we're about to learn. I'll teach you the chorus. Come you out. Oh, this was probably written 1840s, 50s, down in the Coast Range, you know, between Corvallis and the coast. Come you Alsea girls, listen to my noise. Don't you marry those Oregon boys. If you do, your fortune it'll be Johnny cake and venison's all you'll see. Can you do that now? Come you Alsea girls, listen to my noise. Don't you marry those Oregon boys. If you do, your fortune it'll be Johnny cake and venison's all you'll see. So Johnny cake, I've been told, is, you know, you're coming across the covered wagon and you have a few eggs and you kind of put them in the flour barrel. So if they get broken, you can just fish out the shells and stir it up, and that's a Johnny cake. And you just throw that gob in the skillet, and you got a Johnny cake. So let's try that one more time, and then we'll do the song. Come you Alsea girls, listen to my noise. Don't you marry those Oregon boys. If you do, your fortune it'll be Johnny cake and venison's all you'll see. That take you to a side-hewed wall without any windows in it at all. Sandstone chimney and a puncheon floor, clapboard roof and a button door. So come, girls, come, listen to my noise. Don't you marry those Oregon boys. If you do, your fortune it'll be Johnny cake and venison's all you'll see. This is starting to sound like a hymn now. Come on, we gotta pick up the pace a little bit. We're learning it, right? When they go a-milking, they milk it in a gourd, hide it in a corner and strain it with a board. Some gets a little and some gets none. That's how things in the Oregon run. So come, girls, come, listen to my noise. Don't you marry those Oregon boys. If you do, your fortune it'll be Johnny cake and venison's all you'll see. Every night before you go to bed, they build up a fire as high as your head. Rake away the ashes, in they'll throw a great big gob of old sourdough. So come, girls, come, listen to my noise. Don't you marry those Oregon boys. If you do, your fortune it'll be Johnny cake and venison's all you'll see. Now, the way the folk songs work is, I know the song's a little longer, but I can't remember the next verse. So you make up a new next verse, you know, and it just keeps traveling. So my son and I, we made up this last verse. It was right after a great big bunch of rain down on the coast, you know, when the cattle were standing out on the stumps and, you know, the floods were coming up around Tillamook. They take you to a meadow that looks like a bog, every milk cow out standing on a log, rain coming down and the rivers rise, fish like hell and make up lies. Now come, girls, come, listen to my noise. Don't you marry those Oregon boys. If you do, your fortune it'll be Johnny cake and venison's all you'll see. Okay, so that's poetry, right? That's real poetry. I want to read the tiniest chapter from my book, The Muses Among Us. You know, this was going to be called Scribe to the Prophet. And then 9/11 came, and I thought, people might get the wrong idea, Then it was going to be called Making Something Fine, but that sounded a little egotistical. Then it was going to be called 7 Lessons in Mystery and 1 Statement of the Obvious. I kind of like that one, but that one went by the by. So it went through about 10 different titles, and finally we thought, what's the longest possible title? The Muses Among Us, Eloquent Listening and Other Pleasures of the Writer's Craft. And, we're back to this idea of listening. The writer is a professional eavesdropper. The writer is, one of my examples, I'm in a committee meeting at Lewis and Clark, and I overhear one of my colleagues say, well, I have an idea I'd like to toss in the ringer. The ringer? The ringer is like crushing, that's what you by the old washing machine. No, the ring. It's a circus metaphor. Come on, festive. Yeah, what's that old saying? A committee is a place where an idea goes to die. So I'm going to read this tiny chapter, Writing Daily, Writing in Tune. And, this exemplifies one of the things I tell my students, that writing is a form of alchemy by which we turn our failures into celebrations. Sort of like those 2 songs. We're going to celebrate the rain, You can whine about it, but it'd be more fun to sing about it. So this is a time when I was attending Quaker meeting down in Eugene, probably 35 years ago. And I got talking to a gentleman afterward, and he turned out he was a violin maker, a viola maker. And I said, well, I've always wanted to learn how to do that, along with everything else. He said, well, I'll tell you what, I'll send you a pattern, and you cut out, the pattern, and, then we'll make a viola together. And I was in heaven. I thought, I never knew in this life I could do that. So I made a sandwich, laminated some masonite and some particle board, and he marked. No, this is what he told me to do. He marked on the side, and then we were going to curve, the sides of the viola on that. So then he said, "Okay, step up to the bandsaw and cut that out." Okay, He was backing up, And he looked at it and he said, "You got enough wood for 1 more cut." So he redrew it, and I tried again, and he said, "You can't make a viola." That was the end of the lesson. I thought, well, that's one kind of teaching. But I got a little essay out of it, just a page and a half. It's called Writing Daily, Writing in Tune, because he was also a physicist. This is the great thing, when people combine different areas of inquiry. There was a physicist who played the violin. One morning, he took his fiddle to the lab, wrapped it green with felt, clamped it gently in the vise, and trained the electron microscope close on the spruce belly, just beside the sound hole, where a steel peg was set humming at a high frequency. Through the microscope, once he got it focused right, he saw the molecular surface of the wood begin to pucker and ripple outward like rings on a pond. The ripples rising gradually into waves, and the steel peg a blur at the heart of play. When he drew the peg away, the ripples did not stop. In 24 hours, the ripples had not stopped moving. He saw still a concentric tremor on the molecular quilt of the wood. The violin, in the firm embrace of the vise, had a song, a thing to say. In another 12 hours, the ripples flattened and the wood lay inert. Musicians know this without a microscope. An instrument dies if not played daily. A guitar, a violin, a lute chills the air for the first 15 minutes of fresh play. It will need to be quickened from scratch. But the fiddle played every day hangs resonant on the wall, quietly boisterous when first it is lifted down, already trembling, anxious to speak, to cry out, to sing at the bow's first stroke. Not to rasp, but to sing. The instrument is in tune before the strings are tuned. Pablo Casals used to put it this way: if I don't practice for even one day, I can tell the difference when next I cradle the cello in my arms. If I fail to practice for 2 days, my close friends can also tell. If I don't practice 3 days, the whole world knows. Writers know this when they are writing daily. With the first stroke, the hand may swim, the pen glide. The cold glass of the window brightens, the rug has a biography, sweet tension of silent meeting throbs in the room. Unsaid words grow powerful, wish to speak out. Ideas gather their bones and rise up. A face becomes a life, a place, a story. Everything speaks or is powered by silence. Everything dreams aloud. The pen grows numb with haste, but calm with plenty. Yes, there will be labor. Hours with sweat dripping off the elbows. Yes, the words will have to be tuned, but the pen, already shouting, poised and happy. So I made a vow during, I thought, on January 1st of the William Stafford Centennial Year, I made a vow, I'm going to write every day. I'm going to try the William Stafford daily writing method. And the other thing I'm going to send you, if you put your email on there, is my little 2-page essay on how to do it, the 4-step process. And I decided I would do it without fail, these 4 steps. So I'm just going to quickly go through them. So you put the date on a piece of paper. Is that even worth mentioning? Well, William Stafford said, once I write the date on a piece of paper, I know I'm okay. He's made it to his writing. Could we have a show of hands if that's an accomplishment to make it to your writing? Yeah. Okay, so hey, you're home free. And the other thing about the date is, it's not a poem yet. It doesn't have to be well written. It doesn't have to be imaginative, you just write it. Then he would often write some boring prose. Sort of a little diary, yesterday we had dinner at the Polly's and we got talking about Kierkegaard, just a little journal entry. And again, the advantage is the pen is moving before you have to be lyrical, before you have to be eloquent, skilled in any of that. You're just jotting, you're scribbling. Or, one of the books he reviewed, Dag Hammarskjöld's Markings. You're marking. You're just marking. Okay, now it begins to get a little mysterious. His third element, he would often write an idea. We call them his aphorisms. An idea that rises just a few centimeters above the earth. He's seen a pattern, or he's remembered some understanding of how the world works. He didn't often use these. He has a few poems where he gathered a bunch of them together, things I learned last week, and so on. But often they just stayed in there, in the daily writing. Then he would write something like a poem, or notes for a poem, or half a poem. Every day, something like these 4 elements. So I thought I would read a few from this month, from my, I've typed them up so I can read them. So December 3rd, and one of the things that happens inevitably is the aphorism sometimes kind of comes out of the boring writing. And the poem sometimes sort of comes out of the aphorism. The aphorism, or the idea, or the koan, or whatever that thing is, I see as kind of the pivot point. You're leaving daily life. You're just taking one step above the to-do list, the regrets from yesterday. You're going into the realm of your own thought. And so it's a stepping stone, and you don't have to hang on to it because it got you to this other place. So December 3rd. So I'm thinking ahead to my day. Talk today about Mother at the Unitarian Church and keeping with her reticence. Were it a talk about her relation with me, that would be a different talk. But she was pretty much the hero of her own story. Let that be. And then my aphorism: if you must be king or queen of your own story, strive to be an enlightened despot. And now and then go in disguise among the people. So this is just, it's a little pleasure of thought. And I'm not going to, publish the aphorism, but it sort of gets me into the realm of ideas. So then my poem is called Circus of One. My most elaborate disguise begins with my name. Bright nose and absurd hat of Professor Kim, strutting and proclaiming to make them laugh now, cry later. When the lights go down, the big top struck, my roustabouts bundling all I have erected for a distant road, leaving a few stray pages to spiral in the wind. So I make no claim for this poem, but I want to make a big claim for this process. That's 2 days later, December 5. My doctor says I am his healthiest patient. The one thing I need to figure out is sleep, moving up from 6 to 7 hours. And figure out retirement, one of the bigger story problems of my career. The solution to the problem must be abundance made possible by thrift. Okay, so I'm kind of sorting out, this is my to-do thought list. So then my aphorism: thanks to the Great Depression, my parents learned the trick of abundance through thrift. So it's a pattern. Sort of, with this part, I get up and I look around and, okay, there's a pattern, I'll put that. And then this takes me to my poem when I remember a funny story. This is called My Wife's Former Boyfriend, the Millionaire, Weighs My Worth. I'm already having fun. This is going to be fun. He's a nice guy, really. We share shoe size. And once she brought me new loafers he had out for the Goodwill, with the Paris receipt still inside. They're still in touch, you see. So shoes, pants, belt, shirt, and I, humble poet, cut a figure. I see Kim can give you something I never could, he told her after meeting me. Poverty. What a great line, And Perrin claims, well, no, he meant it in a good way. Like, you give me a simpler life. And, he doesn't tell me to not laugh at the fancy French restaurant. Things like that. Okay, so then a couple days later, I've taught my class. This was Sunday morning, December 7th, Pearl Harbor Day. First day of this last class in 2014 is done, and I think today can be fine. My veteran, my lawyer, my hospice worker, my Montessori teacher, my rock musician, the profound hidden in the ordinary, that's the key. Democracy of the self, I am many, and each utterance within is worthy, as a place must have its say. So then my aphorism: daily writing honors the democracy of self. Every utterance has a vote. And then this sends me off into this, dreamy space where I'm thinking, the language, the working of the mind requires everything in the world, or it wouldn't work. Requires bridges, rivers, rain, hummingbirds, the moon. Without those things, we would not be thinking. So we're actually part of a bigger mind. You see, I'm way off in outer space already. So this is called the repertoire of human thought requires a hummingbird. Great theories would never fly without spiders, bridges, night. What grand scheme could we conceive without the open sea enlarging the mind? Without the alphabet of lightning, rivers, beads of dew along a stem of grass, how could faith kindle imagination? Earth is mind, and each philosopher, mother, farmer, vagabond, gathers a knot of thinking in the net of hummingbird, blossom, light, rain, stars. So again, I want to say, I make no claim for these poems, but, as I tell my students, it will be a better day. You know, this is the thing I realized about my dad, and this sort of became part of my talk about him. I thought of him as a big peace witness. You know, he went to Iran, he went to Egypt, he went to Bangladesh, he witnessed in the world many places for peace. But really what was at the heart of that was what I call concentric peace. And that is that every morning he settled his accounts. He made peace with himself. If there's something he regretted, he wrote about it. If there was something coming up that made him afraid, he wrote about it. If he was carrying a resentment, he wrote about it. So that by the time we kids got up at 6 a.m, he was in a great mood. You know, he had settled his accounts. He had made peace. So that then he could go forth and be a peacemaker in the world. So I'm getting kind of, what's the word? Messianic about daily writing. We should all be doing it. And it's not about how good the writing is. It's not about anyone's assessment, including your own. It's about having 15, 20 minutes a day that belong to you. Before the to-do list, before the bad news, before email, before expectations, you know, before all that. And so I want to read now, these are just some of the aphorisms from early in my practice. Can the craft talk address the invisible? Water is always tying knots only the Houdini of water can loosen. Anguish evaporates as the plan takes form. The older I get, the more fresh learning becomes imperative. My gift is my downfall. What is easy, I do not struggle to do well. You know, so you're, as my father would say, you're in the citadel of yourself. You know, you're sort of taking stock of these things. We are a fever of oil-burning ants swarming across the earth. Travel turns the unknown to the known. Memory turns the known to legend. So, you know, in my father's review of Dag Hammarskjöld's markings, he said something about Dag Hammarskjöld that I think was true of my father and I think is true of each of us. We are assaulted by terrible things. We are living a life that is insupportable if it is not sustained by meanings. And so to search for meanings by writing, one can do it by meditation, one can do it by conversation with a good friend. But to do it very consistently, I advocate writing. Okay, well, was that a lecture, a sermon? I'm not quite sure what that was, but it's clearly time to move on. So I think I've read to some of you from this book, Prairie Prescription. This is a great adventure for me. I was to give a reading in Nebraska with Ted Kuzer. It was going to be great. They have these two easy chairs up on the stage and a reading lamp. You know, this is the way they do it on the farm. And Ted and I would be sitting up there, and we'd, you know, take turns reading poems. So the day before I was heading for Nebraska, I thought, I better write a Nebraska poem. You know, that would be the honorable thing to do. I think, you know, Paul Ann does this too. I'm going to be in this town. It'd be nice to start with a poem about this place. And so I remembered a family story, and so I wrote a poem, you know, and then I thought, wait a minute, there was that other story. So I wrote another poem. Wait a minute, how about that other one? By the time the plane was descending into Omaha the next day, I had these 10 poems. And I thought, what other suite of poems am I suppressing? You know, just waiting to be asked. So I'll start with the first one I wrote, and then maybe one more. The family story was that the doctor said to my grandma, you need to follow my prescription exactly, or you're going to die bearing this third child. And this was out on the farm near Pickerel, Nebraska. You know, way out in the middle of nowhere. And so the story of this prescription is, is one of the treasures of the family. I think one of the things that happens in daily writing, yes, I am going to keep beating this horse, is the things you've carried that you know are precious, you honor them by putting them down in a clear form on the page. It doesn't have to be eloquent. It doesn't have to be, some famous. It doesn't have to get published, but you put it down. So I felt I needed to put this down. So it's called Prairie Prescription. You have been weakened, the doctor said, by your first 2 children's birth. This time you must obey without fail, or you will die. Harrison, my grandfather, are you hearing this? I prescribe an hour of beauty a day. Back at the farm at evening, Lottie retired to the rocker on the porch while the fields turned velvet with purple and gold. Crickets tuned their little drums, and the breeze brought pollen from paradise. The dish towel on its hook, laundry basket tipped at the wall, socks not darned, bread not baked, quilt pieced in its box, unsewn. Lottie folded her hands and gazed far into the shadows. Each day an hour of pure sky poured into the child, curled inside her. Slanted sunlight braided into the rising, looming moon she tasted and swallowed. A thimble of starlight, a sip of dew. When the night came at last, the harrowing umbilical tangle inside her, the doctor sent Harrison and the children to the barn to pray. While inside Lottie, all that light and color and music and holy stillness clenched, writhed, and with a wild song, my mother was born. Yeah, my mama, the magnificent, the lady with a whim of iron, as my dad said. And, we just lost her a little over a year ago. She had this line that she said as a little kid. People would try to help her. Dodo, do it. She couldn't even pronounce her own name, but she knew the way the world was going to work for her. Dodo, do it. Okay, I think it's time for another song. So this one happened out at the Fish Trap Writers Gathering. Who's been to the Fish Trap Writers Gathering? Yeah, oh yeah, it's the faithful. We've been out there. So I was going to take a songwriting class from one of the Oregon treasures, Marv Ross, Quarter Flash, and he wrote the Ghost of Celilo, and just a brilliant person. And so we drove out there. We decided to take the scenic route, so we went through Lakeview and Klamath, and, down to Fields and French Glen, came up through Hell's Canyon. A really, really great ride. Of course, it took a while, but small price to pay. We had told our son, when we get to a really empty road, you're going to learn to drive. So that, kept him alert. And he kept saying, we got east of Lakeview, and he said, how about this? No, it's just a puff of dust up there. It might be a car, Finally, Kiger Gorge is where he learned to drive. That was really fun. I was running after the car, he was driving along. Anyway, we stopped in French Glen, and this young girl, 12, 13 years old, she came out on the porch of the store. And you know how strangers sometimes will just tell it like it is. So I said to this little girl, how's it going? I'm here because I messed up. Oh, really? How'd that happen? Well, I'm actually from Oregon City, and, I got in big trouble. I won't go into details, but they sent me out here to get straightened out. And just driving out here was enough, I'll tell you, I was cured of something by the time I got out here, but I'm living with a family here, and, I basically spend my days with the barn cats. I don't know if you like barn cats, but I got some really good barn cats, and I name them, and I feed them. And then that got me working at the store here, and I basically just sweep dust from one side of the room to the other, and then and then back, keep busy. But sometimes I go up on the hill here in the morning, and the sun's coming up, and she just got rapturous, So she went from complaint to rapture, and I thought, that needs to be told. That needs to be told. So I got up to Fish Trap, and Marv said, okay, I want you to think of someone you've met but you don't really know. And I want you to write that person's biography. What are they afraid of? What do they long for? What hurt them? You're going to write this whole story. And then we're going to interview you in class, and you're going to answer in character. It was amazing. So, I became this little girl, and naturally, Marv knew this would happen. You end up telling your own story, but unencumbered by what anyone else thinks your own story is, So I wrote this song in this little girl's voice, and it ended up talking about my grandma, who died when I was about as old as this girl. Let's see if I can remember this song. Grandma named me Bernice, but she called me Baby Boo. I don't suppose that means much to you. She passed away. Left me here working at the store. Funny little job, sweep dust out the door in the evening. But in the morning I climb the hill, sun's up, gold, and the world is still for a moment. That's when time opens the sky, and Grandma never died, Baby Boo. You know what to do. Keep kind in your mind, Baby Boo. Let's see, what's the next verse? First one's thunder, next one's crazy fool. I don't suppose stray cats are much to you, but to me they don't ask much, milk in a bowl, like when you whisper to a soul in secret. Across the road, light in the field, the flattened grass is where I kneel to see. Shapes in the clouds, forms from the past. What you believe is what will last, Baby Boo. You know what to do. Keep kind in your mind, Baby Boo. In the dark where I lie alone, it's like I got Grandma on the phone with me. I hear cats in the yard, frogs in the dark, wind in the trees, and the farm dog barks far away. People here want me to do the things they seem to think are true and smile. Happiness and summer snow, you love what you love, but it comes and goes, Baby Boo. Now you know what to do. Keep kind in your mind, Baby Boo. But in the morning I climb the hill, sun's up gold, and the world is still for a moment. That's when time opens the sky, and Grandma never died, baby boo. You know what to do. Keep kind in your mind, baby boo. Keep kind in your mind, baby boo. Oh, so we were sitting in a circle at Fish Trap, sort of plunking away, and we looked over. There was a young bear over there. It was very confused. And, we figured its mom had just said, go. You're on your own. And this bear, it sort of didn't know, like, well, wait a minute, who's going to feed me? And so we played and we sang, and the bear looked at us, and it was just one of the great moments. I thought, Fish Trap has a little something that other places don't. Okay, I think I'll read a few poems from this. I can't remember, did I read from this book before, Tom? Poems from Bhutan. Yeah, well, I have a friend. I have a friend from Hanoi who said to me one day, let's go to Bhutan. Let's get some people and go to Bhutan. And so I started at the end of every workshop I gave, I'd say, okay, does anybody want to go to Bhutan? Well, yeah, I want to go, but how much does it cost? Oh, probably 10,000. Okay. But finally, a couple said, we're in. Okay, 8 to go. So we gathered people, and I finally called up someone who had just lost her bid for the Oregon legislature, blocking on her name at the moment. I said, let's go to a place that's like Oregon was 100 years ago, where 70 of the people are farmers, where most people live on the land, where there are very old and very precious customs. And so we ended up getting 9 people, 4 couples, and my crazy friend Krzysztof from Poland. Krzysztof Czecheski. And we landed in Thimphu, landed in Paro. We took the bus over to Thimphu. And the first day we were there, we were going to have a free writing workshop for anybody who wanted to come. And, we'd send emails. We had no idea if anyone would come. 60 people came. The head of the Boy Scouts, some newspaper reporters, and a whole bunch of little kids, beautifully dressed in these traditional outfits. So we're sitting in a big circle, about 60 people. And I turned to this maybe 12-year-old girl next to me, and I said, so how far did you come for the workshop? 2 days. There is no writing in my school. I want to write. So I remember one of the prompts we did was describe a sunset. Oh, yeah, they were experts because, see, they have an hour of beauty a day or more. In Bhutan, someone did a study. The road curves every 9 seconds at 30 miles an hour, which is the top speed. So it's going like this, winds your way up over the mountain, down into the ravine, and then you cross a bridge. And I saw this word in Dzongkha, one of the 25 languages of Bhutan. And I don't read Dzongkha, but I started noticing it's the same word at every bridge. So I asked our guide, Shatim Norbu, what is that word? Oh, it says thank you. Well, why does it say thank you? Well, thank you. I mean, to him, this is a very odd question. Well, thank you. And the first thing we were taught when we came, we got out of the airport and we were looking around at these amazing mountains and we said, wow, look at that over there. Shatim came over and went like this. Just that, he said, is disrespectful. This is honoring. And I thought of my mom. This is the way my mom taught school. Over here, we're going to do this, and over here, So this is one of 735 rules in the Driglam Namcha, the book of etiquette. And, it's about honoring your parents and your friends and your place, speaking softly, many, many things. So my first night in Bhutan, I had a dream that there was a gigantic Buddha under Bhutan. And it was the work of every citizen to reveal part of Buddha so that Buddha would be known. So this is called Reclining Buddha of Bhutan. The stone body of the Buddha lies below us in the earth. We are the ones required to reveal him to the world. Lachen, with your young steps, carve his eyelash. All your life to bring forth this one perfection. Punat Sanchu, river, carry the grit of glaciers from Lunana to shape with utter attention the graceful form of Buddha. Ashikunzang, your words like birdsong, like breath of every Amma, wear away what covers the rise of Buddha. With Driglam Namcha, children in the valley of Punaka, dream the ribs of Buddha so they may breathe, even deep in stone. Mothers, fathers of Bhutan, of Bumtang, with Tadamsi form one pore in the stone skin over the heart of Buddha. We will not live to see this long work done by courage, song, action. But we see the work we have to do. What is deeply secret, we know. What must be revealed, we feel. When we sing, we call on all sentient beings to pull away what covers the true form of our country, pebble by pebble, anger by anger, error by error, to remove all obstacles to seeing the grace of the reclining Buddha of Bhutan. Shetim, friend, guide us in our part of this great work. And like Marv's project, as I'm writing about Bhutan, I'm writing about my country. Anger by anger, error by error, to take away what covers the true form of our country. In Scotland, they have a saying, live as if in the first days of a new nation. Daily writing can help us do that. Okay, one more poem from this book. So I got back and I had, again, a poem a day, around Bhutan. So I wrote to Thomas Merton's publisher, Wendell Berry's publisher, Larkspur Press, Sawdridge Road, Kentucky. A guy named Gray Zeitz, big gray beard. He's been doing letterpress printing for 40 years. And I wrote him this. I took 3 days to compose the letter. And there was an image of prayer flags, and then I said, I realize, as it should be, you publish mostly Kentucky authors and Buddhist authors. I am neither. However, I had an experience in Bhutan that deeply moved me and resulted in these poems. I would love to send them to you. So he wrote back, letter, no email. Yeah, Kim, you send them along. I'd love to look at them. And about 6 months later, I got another letter. It said, well, Kim, I would like to publish these poems, but there is one thing about working with Larkspur Press. There is no calendar. So that's fine. So it was a great privilege to work with him. So this is called Nado, the Good Guardian. Nado, the name of a dog. See, dogs are revered in Bhutan because they're one step below humans. So the stray dog might be almost a human. So there are packs of feral dogs everywhere. And one of the first gestures you learn is as if picking up a stone. So, it's not a simple place. But there was this dog that started barking in the night and would not stop barking. And I decided to turn this into a celebration. Nado, the good guardian. And we're at a place, it was 2 hours walk beyond the end of the road. Ogyen Choling, the home of the first woman novelist of Bhutan, Kunzang Chodin. Nado, the good guardian. Who are we to say, when Nado begins to bark in the night outside our sleeping place, he has not protected us from a fierce ghost come to take a soul? Or perhaps the leopard has come along the thorny margin of the field to take another of our young foals. The dog delivers 32 barks. I was counting. Like hard, round beads, and the ghost thinks twice. The leopard turns, uncertain. Who are we to say this good guardian with frost on the fur of his back was not one of us in another life, and now comes back to protect his people? 28 insistent barks, then a breath, 14 barks, then a round of 4 bark bursts. Om Mani Padme Hum. After all, he must face himself in the dusky mirror of a frozen puddle when dawn comes. So now, in the deep dark, while the foal trembles in her stall, the leopard crouches among thorns, the restless ghost turns at the window, and we human listeners hold this waking vigil, hour by hour. Our good guardian keeps on chanting honestly for our protection. Who are we in our safe beds to say he is not the turning between the living and the lost? Who are we? So that was fun. Well, it is 8 o'clock. That was fun. I could tell one story about my mom, and then I'll read the broadside poem to end. And, if you have questions and answers, we'll do a little of that. I wrote this book about my brother. Hard book. My brother who died in 1988, and I missed him, and we couldn't talk about him because he died tragically. And, finally I just had to write this book, and it was very hard to write. And so after I wrote it, I showed it to my mom. And she had 2. She could really get off a good line, I've got to tell you, and she had 2. Her first response was, part of my misfortune being related to a writer is my faults become immortal. I said, well, Mother, this is not a book about your faults. It's a book about our story. She said, well, Socrates said the unexamined life is not worth living. But after reading your book, I think the over-examined life is not worth living either. So when she called and said, I see you're reading at Powell's, will you pick me up and take me? It was with some trepidation that I did so, because I thought, this is going to be rough. So she sat in the front row. I could not make eye contact with her through the reading, because I was sure she was suffering, And so then when the reading was over, it seemed like, as if by a signal, everyone in the audience turned to see how she was doing. And she announced to the room, well, that was fun. And I said, Mother, who would ever have thought we would use that word? She said, well, that was fun. Those were good stories. See, now this is the key. This is why we write. This is why we have language. This is why there are other ways to conduct human affairs than stridency. We turn what is happening to us into a story. And once it's a story, it partakes of celebration and generosity and thought. Okay, I'll end with this poem. I'd forgotten that I sent you this, Tom, so smoke. My darling wife sent me up to a remote cabin in the lake, by a lake in Southern Oregon, to do some writing. It was extremely cold. And she said, I love you, but you're more fun to be around when you've done some writing. So go, And so I went down there, and after 3 or 4 days, she called me up and said, "So how's it going? Have you started a book?" And I said, "Oh yeah, well I've started a book on William Stafford's daily writing process." She said, "No, that's a chapter in your book. That's very good, but that's a chapter in your book." Good wife. Good friend. But anyway, while I was there, I got in this habit of, going for a walk every morning and then jumping in the lake, being careful not to slip on the ice on the dock, and then jump in the lake. So I went down there one time, and there was something going on. It was just it was before first light, really, and there was just something out at the end of the dock. I couldn't tell what it was. It looked like a ball of smoke turning over. Smoke. Under the last of the stars at the lake's edge, among dying pines spiraling stark against the sky, taking off my clothes for a swim, I see dim at the dock's end a rolling ball of smoke, dusky and alive, turning inside out, tapered, then a hump, a rope, a knot, a lump in the soot smudge of mist, and then it separates. Otter and 2 kits, nursing, nipping, chirping, rolling off to slide under the water skin, and gone. Last of my clothes in a heap, I walk the planks from human toward the other, and dive into the dark, forsaking all this claptrap of my tribe for this life of smoke. Fluid, unencumbered, prickled by fresh cold, rolling, we are smoke only for a little while. We are breath boxed, brief treasure free. We are a combustion of joy, turning inside out, under stars, kindled, living, spent, spiraling into the waters deep. Thank you, my friends.